energy is still there.
Yeah.
Other people,
I
how do you
still feel that. I still feel really tense and wanting to distract, wear cute crowns.
Oh,
Beautiful.
the crown helps you distract.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time, maybe Kay was triggering off the earlier anxiety or the conflict, so that got you thinking about supermarket. Or my story of the mother also could have triggered that. So anxiety is sort of like a domino effect.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it, that they're contagious. Emotions are contagious.
Yes.
Amazing. Okay.
So is the ability to transfer the anxiety.
Yes, that's, I certainly didn't intend to do that. Did you know that I read that if you yawn and if a person next to you doesn't catch the yawn, that's a good test to see if they're a psychopath?
Well, how does that work?
Well, let's
If
say
he doesn't catch the yawns are contagious. So.
You're supposed to mirror, like that would be your mirror neurons, which apparently they don't know really what those are, or maybe some people in here know what they are, but I don't. I haven't found a suitable explanation.
So if you yawn and the other dude or dudess is a psychopath, they won't yawn.
They don't yawn. Yeah, I don't know. Well, they don't catch it. You know what I mean? They don't catch it. They're not mirroring.
They can't mirror.
I used to do that to my cat. I used to fake yawn, and it used to yawn and get so pissed off at me.
It's a codependent cat.
I really like your tiara, Zoe. I think the tiara is a lovely touch. It really is. It sets off the whole of this morning.
It's just so lovely. And it fits in with Her Majesty.
Oh yes, Zoe, I love that crown.
I'm the new queen, self-appointed.
Yes, that is epic.
Mm-hmm.
If my supermarket got that crown, even though it's yellow, I would still go. That would change my mind.
So how do we find more words for this anxiety so that we can raise the heat a little? No takers? Nothing?
We'll have to talk about anxiety more. We'll have to talk about anxiety. So it's a desire. We'll have to talk about anxiety. So it's a desire. We'll have to talk about anxiety. So it's a desire to escape. So it's a desire to escape. So it's a desire to escape. So it's a desire to escape.
Now there's probably different types of desires to escape. So somebody who has the agency to avoid a supermarket or a store trigger, that gives them a sense of agency, where somebody who's having a boot stuck on their neck or a car run over them, there isn't really a desire to escape because you're overpowered by a physical outnumbered or overpowered, so that desire to escape is there, but it doesn't have that trap. And at the same time, the people who have that false thread of maybe agency, language of agency, to jump through hoops, spin plates, manage the alcoholism, that's a desire to escape, right?
So it's a desire to escape. So it's a desire to escape. So it's a desire to escape.
But then that might trap you in hypervigilance.
We'll have to talk about anxiety more. 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 We'll have to talk about anxiety.
So can we talk about anxiety more so then we can adjust the nerves?
I'm really worked up right now. My nervous system is really high right now. I'm really worked up right now. I'm really worked up right now. I'm really worked up right now.
Just pretending to not be there. So people got triggered here through different things. Is there a mortal danger in your environment right now? Are there plates being thrown? Is there chaos in your physical vicinity?
Yes, my supermarket is still yellow. It doesn't
The
change.
vision of your supermarket's tormenting you.
Over and paint it, okay?
Maybe
I'll
you
paint
should.
it red. I'll paint it red. I'll come over here with the crew.
No, there's not a tiger outside the window ready, wanting to eat me the minute I walk out the door.
Mm-hmm. But is your nervous system amped up thinking there could be something?
Well, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
No tiger.
And you want to keep living like that the rest of your life, just not thinking about it and having your anxiety, your nervous system get triggered at any moment?
I don't think it does anymore. Huh.
That's a nice thought. You
It is
should
a nice
keep
thought.
thinking that.
I just live in my little fantasy world. It won't ever happen again.
Oh, choosing fantasy. Okay.
Well, for me, I would tend to think this would exposure therapy would definitely. Yeah,
Exposure therapy might make a difference.
yeah make a happy scene out of it. Go there with my buddies and have fun.
Oh.
You could go there multiple times and then have positive or neutral experiences, and that would theoretically dilute your high charge experience, but you might need
That's
to do it
correct.
10 times, 20 times, 50 times or something.
Right, whatever it takes.
Oh, whatever it takes.
I'm willing to do that.
That's sort of like CPT, a variation of CBT where they give you 12 sessions where you just re-explore the experience with the hardest questions.
Oh,
Just
really?
put it in your face with the exercises to dig into your trauma. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I think it's CPT, cognitive something.
Behavioral.
Or CBT is cognitive behavior.
Yeah.
The spin-off is cognitive processing therapy,
Oh.
where they use CBT and then they have like a 12 session protocol to escalate the trauma. It's kind of cool. Or the podcast I heard described it. I'm trying to set up an argument of why to face it instead of reliving it.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell. I didn't really prepare for this theme. But I can try to adapt. Let's see if this makes any sense.
How is it that you act within institutions?
Here, there.
Lots of times people have to go to therapy or talk for a long time to someone to find out where they are, because your experience might have scattered you everywhere, and you feel that that you've come apart at the seams, right? That things have fallen apart around you, that you're in chaos. You don't know where you are, and so maybe you have to bring yourself up to date.
So there might be a feeling of orientation that people have when you're grounded and you're secure. Or secure enough. Then when you get dissociated, or you get triggered by somebody else's anxiety, there's this spaciness feeling of, where am I? What's happening here? I can't track things. Where's the butterfly? Yeah.
In the middle of our forehead.
So what do you do when you're lost in this sort of state?
You have to bring yourself up to date. And you can know if you need to be brought up to date. It's fairly straightforward. If you're obsessed by memories of the past, more than 18 months old, and most of those are negative, so anxiety provoking most often, then there's a lot of you that's stuck in the past. And
So if your memory and your thoughts go to the past, more than 18 months, and a lot of you stuck in the past, wouldn't it be nice to pull some of that past self into the present instead of having it wasted like a boat anchor that's just dragging down your life?
what that means is you didn't map the territory well enough, and the parts of your brain that are alarm systems, anxiety systems, are saying, no, no, there's holes in the way you're looking at the world. There's holes in the way that you're looking in the world. And you fell in them once, and you don't know where they are, and you don't know how to fill them, and you don't know how to walk around them, and so you can't forget them, you can't forget them, you can't forget them, you can't forget them.
So if you have your nervous system that's giving you anxiety saying, you can't forget it, you can't forget it, you can't forget it, or you have an injunction saying, never again, never again, never again, then you have another thought that says, I'm just not going to think about it. What's going to win? Your anxiety that's keep pulling you to the past, or your rational thought that's saying, I don't want to deal with it, I'm just going to think future, I'm going to forget away, live in a fantasy? Which is going to win? The anxiety? Or your brainwashing?
I'd say the
You're stuck
anxiety.
back there.
Anxiety, see? Because you got to see how childhood traumas triggered memories, and it went around the whole room with people getting their anxiety triggered, giving you the bonus that you have unresolved traumas and memories that might be worth trying to integrate. Yeah.
Your body is still reacting as if there's an emergency that could happen again that you haven't fixed. And it doesn't matter if it was your fault. That's irrelevant because the alarm system doesn't care. Like when you're...
The alarm system doesn't even care if it's your fault or whose fault it is. Imagine that. We get lost in guilt of blaming them or blaming ourselves or blaming the world. Anxiety doesn't care. Then you have fights with other people, like blaming self, blaming world, blaming this, that. Anxiety doesn't care. Chaos, uncertainty, unexplored territory, anxiety escalates. Threat detection. Where is the danger? Hypervigilance.
Smoke detector goes off. It isn't relevant whether it was your fault. The smoke detector just says, house is on fire.
But it's a narcissist smoke detector. Let's learn all about narcissists and not worry about the fire that the smoke detector is telling you to get the fuck out of the house. Is it a covert narcissist or an overt narcissist? Is it a yellow one or a red smoke detector? You stay in the house with the smoke detector, you're breathing the smoke and the fire's coming. Your anxiety is still going to be triggered no matter what you tell yourself. Right? At least you should explore if there's actually a fire or not.
And that's a bad thing. And your anxiety systems are like that. If they're tagging old memories with anxiety, then you have to do something about it. Or you will be tortured by those memories forever. Because that's how the alarm system works. And so maybe you need to go back there and clean things up. You got to fix.
Did he say forever? Was that depressing?
You have to do something about it. Or you will be tortured by those memories forever.
That's a bad thought. You should just say you're tortured with the memories for 5 years. Ignore his expertise. Just say, make up a number and just tell yourself it's going to go away after so much time.
Because that's how the alarm system works. And so maybe you need to go back there and clean things up. You got to figure out, okay, well, how did this happen? What sort of role did I play? Even if it's a minor role, that doesn't matter, because the point is that you don't want to be put in the same vulnerable position again. So anything you can do to strengthen yourself is good. Strengthen yourself is good. Strengthen yourself is good.
So the role leads to guilt. Guilt is a tricky thing that codependents fall into.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
Most all answers lead to guilt. Let's see.
Why do we feel so much pity for the narcissist? Terror of negative emotions, like guilt. Guilt, guilt, guilt.
Another word for guilt is control. Where is that? And this is what sometimes groups will tell you how to control.
I think if you want to make a lot of money, just sell people control. I'm going to avoid looking at my issue on this and just project outward and so I do believe the way the law of attraction is interpreted and practiced by, we'll call it the masses, it's a very immature psychological interpretation, saying like whatever I want, I can have. I want a lot of money. And, you know, I'll give a quick rationalization like abundance and like whatever. By the way, what is more gratifying to our ego than feeling in control?
Feeling in control.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
On overdrive.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
Do you know what guilt does? You know one of the best qualities of guilt? It covers up anxiety. Gives you a feeling of control. Anxiety is telling you, house is on fire, dangers everywhere, world's falling apart. You create a language of agency using guilt.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
You feel like you have control. That lowers the anxiety. The only downside is anxiety is in your preverbal cells, in your nervous system. So anything that reminds you of the past trauma is going to trigger your cellular memory of anxiety. And then you'll go into old patterns or you'll dissociate. But then once you come back to your body, then you can use guilt.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
To recreate a sense of control. This is a problem of today's topic of guilt, is because most of the advice we hear is guilt.
Stop it.
That's guilt.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
You need to write the
That's
story
guilt.
of your life. You need to write the story of your life. You need to write the story of your life. You.
I'm just feeling really attacked right now.
That's triggering
really
guilt.
Attacked right now. I'm just feeling really attacked right now. Feeling
This is
really
more
attacked
extreme
right
guilt.
now.
Mr. Crane.
Just feeling
Mr.
really
Crane.
attacked right
Mr.
now.
Crane.
Really attacked
Mr.
right
Crane.
now.
I must have caused that. I must have caused.
Just feeling really attacked.
I must have caused that. I must have caused that. I must have caused that. I must have caused.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
So we have many words to describe guilt and blame and control. But one of the traps that we fall into, because self-help and therapy sells guilt, sells control, sells order to cover up anxiety. Even the trauma therapists who are all somatic, whatever focus, a lot of them are still driven by covering up anxiety, creating a false sense of agency, reinforcing intellectualization.
Nothing.
Then people would define to our ego than feeling in control.
Nothing.
Guess who said nothing? People recognize her voice? Teal Swan. That's What's the question?
By the way, what is more gratifying to our ego than feeling in control?
What is more gratifying than feeling in control? Who answers? And how does she answer?
Nothing.
That's how much of a control freak she is, because she has a lot of anxiety.
Then people would say, well, what can you control other than surrendering your need to control? So I think the masses adopt like, wow, I can really be in control with the law of attraction. All I have to do is put something on my vision board. Then the law of attraction will go to work, allowing me to be the center of the universe, having control over everything I want. And I do this through my dominant thoughts. Like, I control the universe. I am significant because I am controlling the universe. So I think that's having a sense of control is what motivates a lot of people to have an immature mindset. Whereas I think from our ego, it says, I have to make appear what's not already there, and I will be the one in control of that. Not, the universe, like God, like that's not bigger than me. I'm in control here, damn it, because I watched The Secret. So you started to desire that which was coming to you anyway. And as soon as it's like crosses the line of like, now it's manifested, that's when our ego says, yeah, I made it happen. And maybe our higher self says, like, yeah, that's cute. You keep thinking you made it happen. Just like you might have a 5-year-old in the back seat with its toy steering wheel saying, like, I'm driving this car. Good. I'm making it happen. And mom and dad turn around like, yeah, that's cute. You keep thinking you made that happen, even though you didn't. I think if you want to make a lot of money, just sell people the belief that they're in control. And I think that's what I would call the shallow propaganda of the law of attraction does. Why don't we ever ask ourselves, is it good for us to get everything we want? What if one of the worst things that could ever happen is for us to always get what we want? But we need to question, like, why do I want what I want? And what part of me is wanting what I want? Is that like a really in tune, developed, centered part? Or is it a very wounded part looking to compensate for itself? Is it a very wounded part that has a despair of insignificance inside and is trying to compensate for that by creating the illusion of significance on the outside? And is that what's driving its wants? Yeah, to me, like, what we need and what we want are oftentimes two very different things. Sometimes they're aligned and sometimes they are drastically opposed.
So if your anxiety needs exploration, education, and your ego wants guilt and control, sense of control, what's going to win? Anxiety or your ego? So this is still opening up, trying to create an argument. We'll give you some outs, hopefully by 9. I encourage you to continue entertaining this. You can always go back to older strategies later.
While he was speaking, I heard Teal Swan with that laughter. It felt wicked. It felt really wicked, like it was that she's been caught out or something.
JP was very good at doing indirect jabs at Teal. And using humor to sort of cover it up. Yeah. He was attacking a lot of...
It's like a sage space, yeah.
So how do I link guilt with anxiety or trauma, hypervigilance? Is that what we're talking about? I'm afraid people maybe aren't as triggered as they were earlier. That's a problem with JP's two humors. Let's continue control.
The base core paradigm is a nice guy or a nice girl doesn't believe they're okay just as they are. Doesn't believe they're okay just as they are. All children are very narcissistic. They're the center of their world. And so when something painful happens, we believe, I must have caused that. I must have caused that. I must have caused that.
which is guilt.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
Or control. How can I change? How can I shapeshift to change the cause so you get the effect?
Guilt, guilt, guilt.
Which then turns into a grandiose belief system that has two sides to it. One is that I'm so bad, I cause people to leave me, hurt me, cry, be depressed, drink, yell, scream, whatever. And if I am that powerful to cause that, I also must be powerful enough to prevent that or fix it. I must have caused that. I also must be powerful enough to prevent that.
So the prevention trap is sort of that fantasy bond. And then that can bleed out to I can try to prevent an emotional flashback, which you can spend lots of your life avoiding it. But then if that ends up being all-consuming, where you're spending all your energy and your world is small, that's a big price to pay.
Or fix it. So we grow up to be children, adolescents, adults with a belief system. If I can just be good enough and become what I think other people want me to be, then I'll be liked and loved and get my needs met. And if I can hide anything about me that might get a negative response from other people, then I'll never get abandoned. I must have caused that. I must have caused that. I must have caused that. Doesn't believe they're okay just as they are. I must have caused that.
So it doesn't believe they're okay the way they are. You could say that's shame, but that's also guilty. I don't feel accepted as I am. I feel like I'm broken. I feel like I'm in trouble. What can I do to change? To get acceptance, to control acceptance. And this is a nice tip. I forgot what this video says, but let's see.
If we need something always, or for the most part, to calm us down, if we're feeling something overwhelming, we instantly have to do an action. If we have to take a breath, if we have to do something behaviorally to bring our system down, and it's done deliberately with that thought, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I better do this. It's a big indication that the system doesn't know how to self-regulate, because if...
So that was also guilt right here, I think.
And it's done deliberately with that thought, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I better do this.
I'm feeling overwhelmed, I better do this. That is
Guilt, 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 guilt.
We can call it superego, inner critic, injunctions, rules, but it's just guilt to cover up anxiety. And anxiety is just unexplored territory, which you need education and exposure to relearn to update your map so that next time you revisit that potential stimulus or trigger, you feel you have more choices. That's all. But if you just keep running away from your anxiety with guilt,
Guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt, guilt.
it just is endless. So
I'm feeling overwhelmed, I better do this. It's a big indication that the system doesn't know how to self-regulate, because if we do know how to self-regulate at that autonomic nervous system level, then we don't have to think it, because autonomic nervous system means automatic. It
automatic.
just happens. Automatic. It just happens.
So there's a teaser. If you work on your emotional flashbacks and your anxiety and your trauma memories, your autonomic nervous system can be rehealed, reorganized to automatically regulate yourself without having to use guilt.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
So who's interested in not having guilt as their primary orienting mechanism?
No, I love it. It's fantastic.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
It's an injustice, it is. It's an injustice, it is. It's an injustice, it is. It's an injustice, it's an injustice.
Nobody loves me. It's an injustice.
The guilt trap leads to injustice.
I hate that fucking cartoon character.
Oh no, I like him. He's so cute.
My torturous childhood was punctuated with that thing.
And when it grows up, pretends to be an adult. That's the fucked up thing.
Huh. So I can beat up on guilt more, and there's lots of territory to do that, but then it's easy for y'all to just use guilt to fight guilt, which is why I'm trying to work on a puzzle in my head to try to figure out another way to present it or bring it up. Okay.
Okay, are you saying, because I'm not very good at this guilt thing and all that,
Mhm.
and shame, guilt and shame very much confuse me, but
Okay.
and really kind of anxiety does too, because
Okay.
I'm not, and I think you're saying that if you I guess hold it out here, look at it and say, okay, this is the cause of why I feel anxious or guilty. And you know, I guess you would need to reach back in your past for any clues and hints. And then by doing that, you're training your body to do that instead of try to cover it up, just hide from it. Is that right? It's like the hiding from it's causing you to be anxious because you're really not facing it. You're running from it.
Well, guilt creates a sense of control,
Yeah, okay.
and that sense of control covers up anxiety. And then anxiety is a message from your body, your nervous system, that says your memory is fucked up. You had a fucked up experience in the past that was dangerous, and you don't feel safe to navigate the future. So anxiety is coming up in your system and is saying, confusion, unexplored territory. So it's a message from your body saying you need to update your map. You need to figure out what skills you were lacking. You need to figure out how much you did wrong. You got to figure out how much the world did wrong. You have to figure out how much the parent did wrong. You have to figure that out. And when you figure it out where your nervous system feels like it matches reality, then anxiety just disappears.
Okay.
You could take a shortcut and then you could say, I did nothing wrong and I blame the narcissist. Or you could take a shortcut and say, I did everything wrong. And that's guilt. That'll cover up the anxiety, but that's not updating your map for the real world. Because if you did everything wrong, then you got to control everybody. That's a huge burden, right? And if you did nothing wrong, then you just have to see red flags everywhere because narcissists and bad people are everywhere. So that's also anxiety producing. So the guilt trap is where you learn to have, the way out of the guilt trap is where you learn shared responsibility. You have to navigate your memories and see how much did you have control? How much did the other person have control? How much was your environment, how much was it stuff you didn't know, your blind spots, their blind spots. And once you make sense of all that stuff, you can re-engage the world or similar conflict, and you feel a sense of agency because you learn from your past fuck up and you're ready to take on another adventure. Does that make sense? Good question. If you get lost, throw stuff out there. The guilt pathway doesn't help with unexamined beliefs. Yeah, guilt is assigning judgment. Who's at fault, who's innocent. And it's a splitting defense. Paranoid schizoid split. Black and white, good and bad. You regress, and then you break things up into polarities.
So it seems to me, Deef, that guilt is initially a conclusion or a solution to the problem intellectually. And it may cause some emotion, but it starts off being a way to understand what's happening. And
it starts off as a way of controlling chaos, of containment. That might be more accurate.
Yeah.
Where is that chart? So you have information overload. You have the bad result. You took an action. You fucked up. You have bad result. So what you do as a shortcut is you make more rules. How can I change behavior? Or how can I leave the area of other people I blame to get safety? Or whatever your short-term goal is. And you can just keep doing this loop over and over and over again. But anxiety might be calling you to look a little bigger and say, how is my thinking? How is the context? How is my understanding of the situation? Can I sort of update my models? Can I start reframing things? What's the other person's perspective? What's my perspective? What's a broader perspective? How can I gain a bit more mastery? So then you can get insights. But typically the narcissist will kill your insights with doubt and cause cognitive dissonance. So they can regress you to guilt. So that's why the insights are crossed out. The abusers will cause cognitive dissonance, sowing doubt into you, and then you regress into enforcing rules. Then if you have the forethought to update your map, you can now update your identity. Figure out who you are, what's your sense of self. Do you have any principles? Can you transform? Can you learn how to learn? And that'd be exploring shame. How much can you change from experience? How much can you grow and learn from experience? Or you can fixate at guilt, which is just try to control the results with a lot of rules. The guilt trap.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
Thou shalt not. These are injunctions.
Codependency, top down. You tell me what to think. Guilt, 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 guilt.
To get things done.
Guilt, guilt,
to get things done.
Guilt, guilt.
You need to.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
These are all rules. They're just
You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah 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 until blah 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 blah. You can't blah blah blah.
The guilt trap. Or it's just policing or rules on rules. So here's
no longer possess the common sense to understand that not every problem in the world can be fixed with a regulation. You have to inject yourselves into everything, just making rules to make rules, because it makes you feel like you're a better person. Making sure that everything bad never happens again, which you can never fully do. It just makes everyone else's life a drag. Makes everyone else's life a drag.
You make rules on rules on rules, and then you end up policing yourself and everyone else, which is what we're doing in the country.
All the while, as we were continuing to boost funding for police and give them more authority, we were simultaneously slashing spending on key social services. That meant that in many communities, the police were the only ones left to handle almost any issue that people had, which is a real problem, as this former Dallas police chief readily admits.
We're asking cops to do too much in this country. We are. We're just asking us to do too much. Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding. Let the cop handle it. Not enough drug addiction funding. Let's give it to the cops. Here in Dallas, we got a loose dog problem. Let's have the cops chase loose dogs.
And you know what? He's absolutely right. We are asking police to do far too much. They have a massive array of complicated duties that in many cases they just aren't equipped to handle, making them very much the Jared Kushners of local officials, without, of course, the expression, complexion and general demeanour of a haunted baby. So while we should absolutely be angry at the police right now, let's also be angry at the series of choices that left them as essentially the only public resource in some communities. And on
So we police a lot in our society, and we do the same thing socially.
I was policing her language in her
Yes.
own judgment, in her
Yes.
own judgment, in her
Yes.
own judgment. I was policing her language in her
Yes.
own judgment. We can't say that either. We can't say that either. We can't say that. That's
Anything goes.
judgment. That's
Anything goes.
judgment. I was policing her language in her
Yes.
own judgment, in her
Yes.
own judgment, in her
Yes.
own judgment. I was policing her. I was policing her.
And that's just guilt.
Guilt, 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 guilt.
So what's the way out? We got 20 some minutes. Give you a little bit of a carrot. Maybe you don't have CPTSD. Maybe it's not just trauma. Maybe it's also, or more so, a moral injury, betrayal, resentment, fairness. I don't know how to stuff all the good videos I have on that for now. Oh. Let's start with betrayal, since a Neocon's not here. We'll bring a Neocon recorded.
The anger was very deeply rooted in betrayal. How can my parents betray me like that? You know what I mean? But that's where the anger was. The anger wasn't, by default, I'm playing ball and letting loose of that physical anger, but mentally, there's a deep rooted anger. And when I finally came face to face with it, it was my, where it was angry baby, it was not no baby, it was a big fucking 20-foot monster that I met. And I'm like, this is who I am. What I'm really learning, again, from this exposure.
So when you have betrayal wounds, you have this sort of metaphor. I'm curious to see how this lands. I thought this was kind of clever. This is how codependence and abuse survivors give up their power. They're fighting internal projections. They're fighting themselves. So this is War Inside, a metaphor video. Moral injury. Has anyone heard of that term? No? Would you be surprised that a lot of codependent traits fit under moral injury? But it's mostly for military war survivors, and now it's caregivers who are in the front lines of medical care and getting compassion fatigue. But when you're witness to something that goes beyond your moral compass, when you have a parent that does something that's beyond your sense of fairness, and that continues, that's injuring your morality, that's injuring your map of the world, that's injuring your sense of justice, your sense of fairness. That causes you to be fearful of trusting new people. That causes you to have red flags everywhere, worrying about narcissists or any other people harming you, because you have a lot of anxiety because you can't navigate the world and other people because you're still carrying moral injury. So this is going to land like really good or horrible.
It comes in the wake of high-stakes situations in which things go very wrong and harm results.
So who's had childhood trauma where there are high-stakes situations, whether it's from threat of physical harm or actual physical incapacitation with very wrong and harmful results? So that fits under moral injury. Look at that.
It can emerge in those who do the wrong, those who are harmed by those they trust, who have power or authority. So it can be something that is done wrong to you, not just something wrong that you might have done. It can affect those who are witnesses to that harm. This is what you might call bystander effect. And it can affect those who have an emotional investment in an event and hear about the harm. It's serious, and it disrupts our love and meaning systems. So,
look, it disrupts our love and meaning systems. Could the disruption be a metaphor for intimacy? Do codependents have disrupted intimacy and relational trust issues? Do codependents jump the gun and attack other people's stories because there's meaning issues? Do codependents come and fight like there's not enough space for two people's stories because there's meaning structure, meaning disruptions? Moral injury. Interesting.
So as human beings, love is crucial to survival and to being a decent person and having a sense of our own humanity. So to have that disrupted is a major break. What are some of the signs of moral injury? So some of the social issues you may notice if someone has it is that they may be isolating, not wanting to socialize or be with other people.
Avoiding triggers.
They may have a lot of aggression, even a toxic kind of anger that they're not able to control.
Triggered outbursts of rage, anger, emotions, outrage for moral injustice.
It's an injustice, it is. It's an injustice, it is.
substance misuse, lack of safety, lack of social safety, lack of belonging.
Or they may be misusing substances to control the pain. Or they may feel unsafe all the time. They may be just anxious and even hypervigilant sometimes.
Hypervigilant.
They lack
We covered that
trust.
earlier.
They mistrust themselves and other people. They will often be suspicious of others' motives or behaviors.
Paranoia, suspicion. Can't let my guard down. Where was that?
I have a guard up for sure. Red flags go off. Red flags go off.
You take this armor off, we die. We die. We.
Intimacy impairment. How does she describe that?
And they're not able really to engage in intimate relationships because their capacity to trust is so impaired, and you have to have that to have good relationships. The spiritual challenges of moral injury include loss of faith. You may also give up on ordinary relationships. It can also mean people lose that kind of personal discipline and structure that they have in their lives, that they don't like authority, don't like structures, resentful of it, or themselves just give up all the personal disciplines they used to have. Existential.
So spiritual bankruptcy, loss of faith in humanity, loss of faith, or betrayal wound that just never recovers. I'll never be betrayed again. I will always be worried about getting blindsided. Existential issues.
Existential issues include fatalism, despair, is unrelenting grief, sorrow that just doesn't have comfort in it at all.
Unrelenting grief.
And the self becomes a negative thing. People will sometimes say, I have an evil thing inside me. They may loathe themselves, really hate themselves.
Self-hatred, we've covered that.
Or say things like, I don't know who I am anymore, but who I was just isn't here. They may get so severe in their moral injury that they contemplate taking their lives because they just don't feel like they deserve to live anymore. So there's some main points about moral injury. I think it's important to.
Maybe this offers some hope, I'm not sure. Let's see.
Remember, we are all born moral because it's essential to being loved, and we don't survive without love from the moment we're born. And I actually agree with them. I do believe that human beings are born moral, which is why moral injury is such a serious personal crisis. And moral injury, therefore, is also not a disorder. It's a risk of the human condition and human frailty, but it results in a sort of war inside that is anguishing. And it comes from that moral place in us, our humanity, that is now fighting with our experiences that devastated us. It's we call it the war inside, because the experiences that cause moral injury, that have led to the moral injury, can't be integrated. They just sort of take over and haunt people, and they just are sitting there, and a conscience can't make sense of it, can't integrate it into a moral meaning system that makes sense of life. So alleviating.
Oh, that's the answer. That's why it stopped. To create some anxiety. But you can read it. But the war inside, I think that's where I've been trying to give the pointer that codependents are giving up their power. When you're fighting projections, or you're fighting for space, or fighting to be heard, because that's externalizing your inner war inside. Or your childhood memory of not shared fantasy you didn't finish, and then you project that on other people that disagree with you, that have different experience, that don't mirror your situation. that's where you need the people there, and you can just talk it out and sort through your external projection and your wound, and then you can take your power back. But it's hard, because you're taken over by the part. I think she described that. So the war inside ends up being a fragmented part in IFS language that just blends into you and takes you over. And sometimes it has a dissociative fugue, so you don't remember when you got taken over. That's really cool. That's why it's good to have video, so you can watch yourself get triggered, and then you try to integrate those parts that take you over. Otherwise, they take you over and then you forget. That pattern continues. So, alleviating the suffering requires, here's the out. Let's see how easy she presents it. Probably not.
That suffering, it requires us to actually reconstruct our humanity. So part of the task of alleviating the suffering is helping people reconstruct a life narrative where the moral injury isn't the only defining thing about that life.
When the moral injury is the only thing that's defining your life, that's negative identity. You don't have enough of a help or a structure or space to slowly develop and explore a positive identity. So in the absence of not having a positive identity, your negative identity is your identity, and you're good at it. That's you spent your life creating this strong structure of your fallen negative identity. You're not just going to throw that away. Then you got nothing in the real world. So it takes a lot of work to recreate a positive identity.
Reconstructing our humanity is how we recover from moral injury, but that reconstruction can't ignore the moral injury. It can't just say, okay, well, that's in the past now and we can move on. You don't really move on from it. It's never going to be forgotten. It may still cause pain in your life every time you think about it, but instead of being the biggest factor in your life that defines who you are, it becomes a piece of information for understanding who we are and developing a greater sense of wisdom and integrity from having reflected upon it in a deep way. That kind of reflection takes a very long time. Takes a very long time.
It only takes 5 hours. Just believe me. That's all. Make up a number and just believe it real hard. Or she might be accurate. Yeah, it probably takes a long time. Make it last longer. So how many people thought moral injury related to your trauma wounds? Does that make more sense than just CPTSD, where you're just treating your nervous system, ignoring your moral substructure?
Makes a lot of sense. Much more than the trauma. Yeah.
Okay, had to sign off. She sent that to me. 9 o'clock, maybe it was a time window. So maybe we didn't scare her off. I don't know. So I was trying to present that guilt, because Carla McLarlin, she thinks that guilt isn't an emotion. Which was a little surprising to me, but then I played with that idea. And then guilt and morality is an emotion of fairness and justice. And it's an emotion that's more of a social radar, a morality radar. So it helps you navigate relationships. Who's safe, who's unsafe. What is the safe thing to do for my behavior in this social situation? And then if you grow up in an isolated childhood traumatic family, you're being flooded by non-standard morality. you're being immersed in a non-standard, perverted social structure that doesn't map into the real world. And there's just maybe nothing to help fill in those gaps. That might be more of the problem. And a lot of therapy thought that morality was babies were born clean slate, but actually babies have baby morality, infant level.
Are we born with a
This
sense
is like
of
10 years
morality?
old.
Or do
16
we
years.
arrive blank slates, waiting for the world to teach us right from wrong? Enter the baby lab. Does Wesley here, at the ripe old age of 5 months, know the difference between right and wrong? Wesley watches as the puppet in the center struggles to open up a box with a toy inside. Nice behavior? Mean behavior. At least to our eyes. But is that how a 5-month-old sees it? And does he have a preference?
Wesley, do you remember these guys from
What's
the
his
show?
preference?
To find out, a researcher who doesn't know which puppet was nice and which was mean offers Wesley a choice.
Who do you like?
Wesley chose the good guy, and he wasn't alone.
That one?
More than 3/4 of the babies tested reached for the nice puppet.
That one.
75%, so it's not total universal, but there is leanings.
Study after study after study, the results are always consistently babies feeling positively towards helpful individuals in the world and disapproving, disliking, maybe condemning individuals who are antisocial towards others.
They showed
But it doesn't stop there. It gets more interesting.
babies like James here a puppet behaving badly. Instead of rolling the ball back
It's
to
the
the puppet in the
bad
middle,
bunny.
this green-shirted bunny keeps the other puppet's ball
Selfish
and runs
bunny.
away. Then James is shown a second show. This time, the bunny, who we just saw steal the ball, tries to open up the box to get the toy. Will James still prefer the puppet who helps out?
The
Or
nice
will he
puppet?
now prefer the one who slams the
Or
box
the-
shut?
Vicious one.
Who do you like?
He chose the one who slammed it shut, as did 81% of babies tested.
81%. That's higher than the last one, 3/4. Chose the one that enforced punishment on the bad person. So that's a sense of morality.
The study's conclusion, babies seem to view the ball thief as deserving punishment.
So do you think that babies, therefore, are born with an innate sense of justice?
At a very elemental level, I think so.
Innate sense of justice?
The origins of bias, the tendency to prefer others.
Now this is even more freakier. Just a preference of cereal creates a tribalism.
who are similar to ourselves.
Adults will like others who share even really absolutely trivial similarities with them.
So will Nate, who chose Cheerios over graham crackers, prefer this orange cat, who also likes Cheerios, over this gray cat who likes graham crackers instead.
Which one do you like?
Apparently so.
Remember these guys?
But if babies have positive feelings for the similar puppet, do they actually have
The different
negative
puppet.
feelings for the
Uh-oh.
one who's different? To find out, Wynne showed babies the gray cat, the one who liked the opposite food, struggling to open up the box to get a toy. Will Gregory want to see the graham cracker eater treated well,
The nice one.
or does he want him treated
Or-
badly?
Badly.
Which one do you like?
Haha.
That one. Okay.
Gregory seemed to want the different puppet treated badly.
That is amazing. So he went with his bias in a way.
And so did Nate,
That one?
and 87% of the other babies tested.
87%. That's the highest percentage of the three things.
From this, Wynne concludes that infants prefer those who harm others who are unlike them.
What could be more arbitrary than whether you like graham crackers or Cheerios?
Nothing.
Nothing. But it matters. It matters to the young baby. We are predisposed to break the world up into different human groups based on the most subtle and seemingly irrelevant cues. And that, to some extent, is the dark side of morality. It's the dark side of morality.
I'd say the dark side of morality is we prefer punishing. We prefer inflicting justice onto people. There's a strong innate bias for us to do that. And then we have codependents who have this sort of nice overlay. You don't give your dark side, your monster, an outlet. So then it comes out sideways. When anybody you deem that's morally wrong, all your sadistic joy comes out. Because innately, we have a dark side. The babies did. That's even... nice. The niceness trap.
You see, when you believe that you have a human right, that everyone must be nice to you, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're creating in yourself a victimization mentality, because when people are mean to you, you say, you have no right. No, they do have a right. It may be immorally wrong, but it is their constitutional right. In fact, the right we have in this nation is the right to free speech. See, we think the answer to end hate speech is to crack down on speech and demand less speech, but the reality is, it's no. Let more speech happen, and may that speech be empowered by the virtue of love so that it can drown out the vice of hate.
Ooh. Oh, I was going to try to link that. Boundary setting is essentially making up laws on a whim, and then once somebody else breaks it, you can enforce and judge them maliciously. So boundary setting, empathy, all the stuff that's out there is just moral structures using morality as socialization policing, because there's this sort of clean slate strategy or theory that psychology thinks that everyone has a clean slate and you can just write new code on top of people. But innately we're born with a moral compass, and then if we get the injury, then we have a fucked up moral foundation, and that's messes with relationships and it keeps the repetition going. We have to rewrite, fix that identity. Eric wants a link to the video. It's Volunteers of America. And there's tons of moral injury seminars that are like an hour long. I don't have time to go through them all. You'll have to customize it into codependence because it's mostly targeted to a military audience. But it's the same injury. There's the link. Okay, we lost some of the intensity. But we can get it back later. Any closing questions or comments on the theme before we dive into...
Yeah, even with some of the soldiers that come back, like in a PTSD, and they identified with that, when you listen to their stories, a lot of it is about the immorality of going into that war and how they were lied to that's the main injury that they stay with. That
Mhm.
you know, I was lied to about this horrible thing.
The betrayal of being lied to. If they thought the war was like just or there was a cause,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
the cover story is overblown.
yeah. That
That's
sort
a
of thing.
giant betrayal. They
Yeah,
risked
from
their
your own
life. They saw
people. You,
other soldiers and friends die in front of them for a meaningless
Yeah.
or a different reason. That's a huge
the
betrayal.
cannon fodder, cannon fodder sort of thing. But my government lied to me. I was like 20 years old, didn't know how the world works. Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. It's more that moral injury than one event's going to do it.
Well, it's harder to heal. I think part of their healing is using forgiveness. I wasn't able to figure out how to pitch that to codependence. That comes later. The forgiveness comes later, but giving up control, realizing how much guilt weighs you down, covers up your anxiety, and makes you more prone to just getting taken over and just reliving your childhood. Dropping that guilt cover strategy, that's sort of the first step, I think. And I had that more mapped out. But due to the side things, I had to go this way. Oh, it had a nice ending. We can still do the ending. It doesn't make sense. It sort of makes sense. This is the answer.
Can you be my friend? Can you be my lover up until the very end?
Let me show you love, no pretend. Stay by my side even when the world is caving in. Oh, don't you worry, I'll be there whenever you want me. I need somebody who can love me
at my worst.
No, I'm not perfect, but I hope you see my worth.
To see my worth at my worst.
Since only you, nobody knew I put you first. And for you, girl, I swear I do your worst.
If you stay forever, let me hold your hand. I can feel this place is in your heart, no one else can.
No one else
Let me
can.
show you love, no pretend.
No
I'll
fakeness.
be right there, baby, you know we sink or swim. Oh, don't you worry, I'll be there whenever you want me. I need somebody who can love me at my worst. No, I'm not perfect, but I hope you see my worth. Since only you, nobody knew I put you first. And for you, girl, I swear I do your worst. Oh yeah. I need somebody who can love me at my worst.
No, I'm not perfect, but I hope you see my worth.
Since only you, nobody knew I put you first.
And for you, boy, I swear I do the worst.
Doesn't this capture some of that unmet need? To have someone there? have your back, but at the same time, you have to be willing to show up. That's the two-part equation. And then ultimately, if you have somebody that can be there for you externally, then you can stop self-abandoning yourself and be there for yourself. Having that soft side of your shared humanity being broken. Openly having that seen by somebody else, that's terrifying for codependence. Not just that, maybe you got punished for sharing that as a child, or that got exploited from your childhood wound. So now you've associated sharing yourself at your worst, letting someone see that as stigmatizing, writing off your humanity.